ClandesTime.
Hello everyone and welcome back to ClandesTime. I am Tom Secker, coming to you from the grassy knolls of North Yorkshire, and this is episode 55, the Crackdown on Crackpots.
We can all feel part of this country, and we must now all come together and stand up for our values with confidence and with pride. We should challenge the ludicrous conspiracy theories of the extremists. The world is not conspiring against Islam. The security services aren't behind terrorist attacks. Our new prevent duty for schools is not about criminalising or spying on Muslim children. This is paranoia in the extreme. In fact, that duty will empower parents and teachers to protect children from all forms of extremism, whether Islamist extremism or neo-Nazi extremism. We should challenge together the conspiracy theories about our Muslim communities too, and I know how much pain these can cause. We must stand up to those who try to suggest there's some kind of secret Muslim conspiracy to take over government, or that Islam and Britain are somehow incompatible. People who say these things are trying to undermine our shared values and make Muslims feel like they don't belong here, and we must not let these conspiracy theorists win.
That was a bit of David Cameron talking a bunch of pretty vague nonsense about how conspiracy theories and Islamism are the same thing, and how they need to be confronted. And this has been the flavour of the rhetoric around the new Snoopers Charter that the Tories are now trying to make into law. And having read the draft of this legislation, I can say that there is nothing in it that the security services aren't already doing. The notion that this legislation actually enables anything new is, unless I'm mistaken about this, somewhat naive. What it does do is help legalise and normalise what they're already doing, and of course should be opposed for that reason. I am not for one moment saying don't care about this legislation. If you can think of a good way to oppose it that has half a chance of working, then please do, go right ahead. When David Cameron started giving these speeches about extremism, and in particular when he said, "For too long we have been a passively tolerant society saying to our citizens, as long as you obey the law, we will leave you alone," a lot of people found that incredibly creepy, if not the sort of thing that a fascist might say. And they would be right. But half of the electorate, or at least half of the people who bothered to vote, voted for a party that is, in implicit or explicit terms, opposed to multiculturalism, i.e. advocate a single unified British culture, in the words of a UKIP manifesto. So they voted for this crap. This is what the backlash against immigration and multiculturalism actually looks like in political terms. A single unified British culture. Monoculturalism. No deviations. Now, it's a weird sort of centre-ground, politically correct monoculturalism, but it isn't hard once you've established the necessity for monoculture in principle to shift from the centre ground to a more extreme point of view. I have to say that all of the gay people and gay rights people who celebrated the Tories legalising homosexual marriage are being suckered, because if the government placates you by granting you a right that you should just have anyway, then they can just take it away again. And trust me when I say that most UKIPs and an awful lot of Tories are not big fans of gay people. Laws can be repealed, is all I'm saying. However, there isn't anything new in this attempt to associate violent radicals like Islamists with conspiracy theories. And in truth, there is something of a connection there, though almost all of the official examples of this are nonsense. In the government's narrative of the 7/7 bombings, they say that the 4 alleged bombers were, to keep things brief, 9/11 conspiracy theorists. And so, people like me, who are 7/7 conspiracy theorists, are, presumably, potential suicide bombers? I mean, I can assure you that that isn't true. I might one day try and assassinate a senior politician, but I will never blow myself up on a train to kill myself and just some random people. That's not going to happen. But Gideon Osborne should get better close personal protection, because whenever I see him, it's a turkey shoot for anyone even half-trained. Now, I'm not even half-trained, I've only ever shot air rifles, but the point is that from a practical point of view, it would not be that difficult. And yet, it doesn't happen. Not since the glory days of the IRA killing the odd lord and nearly killing Thatcher has anyone even got close to murdering a senior politician. And obviously, there's only one thing that we can blame for that, and that's chavs. But getting back to extremism and conspiracy theories, there is something to all that, but you have to wonder which is the cause and which is the effect. Do people believe in conspiracy theories because they can give themselves an excuse for being bloodthirsty or just psychopathic, natural-born killers? Yes, I think some do. But likewise, do some people turn to violence because when you realise just how vicious governments and corporations can be, that it seems like no other choice is going to make any difference? Yes, I think that also happens. I am, myself, for the most part, a pacifist. I believe in trying to confront the intelligence services, the deep state, in an intellectual way. A lot of my work speaks directly to them rather than to any specific audience, and no doubt they are listening. But I do understand other people becoming depressed and angry and turning to violence as a result of realizing how corrupt the world can be. Some of them will kill themselves, sadly, of course, but some of them will kill others. However, all of that is a subset of conspiracy theorists. Most conspiracy theorists, like most whatever category of people, never kill anyone, or at least not on purpose. The vast majority of people who kill other people are either psychopaths or people working for the major institutions of power. That's the reality, attested to by endless data and indeed most of human history. But they can't tell you that. So they say it's all because of widespread gun ownership, or too many people on antidepressants, or rap music, or conspiracy theories, or single mothers, or poverty, or climate change, or anything else except the reality. Now, I'm sure that widespread private gun ownership in a population who are mostly on some kind of psychotropic drug and whose popular culture glorifies and trivializes violence is a factor in why the US has so many mass shootings. It's a pretty deadly cocktail if you think about it. But what they don't tell you is the numbers of people killed in mass shootings versus the number of people killed by the various branches of the security services. Indeed, the second number, the total number of people killed by the police, DHS, FBI, CIA, DEA, Secret Service, and all the rest, that's not a number I can give you. I don't know what it is. But I'm damn sure it's a lot higher than the number of people killed by nutters who took too many SSRIs and watched too much 24, and then stole their parents' gun and shot some people. So what's the lesson here? That people are far too easy to make believe in causes for things, and from those presumed causes are far too willing to build entire worldviews. David Cameron was saying nothing particularly new. It's still horrible, and in some ways frightening. But basically, we've had a fascist or a psychopath in charge of this country for decades, and this is the logical result. We might do better at fighting against that phenomenon if we call it what it is, rather than pretending to get all shocked just because some privately educated psycho in a suit said something. And while you might hope that it would be the alternative crowd who would get this, I have to be honest and say I don't see much sign of that. When David Cameron made that statement about being too passive in the face of law-abiding citizens who just don't believe what Cameron would like them to believe, a lot of people in the conspiracy crowd responded to this with a self-victimizing attitude. Now, admittedly, that kind of mentality is pretty widespread in this sector of society. When you get those bald-headed twat psychologists on TV saying that most conspiracy theorists exhibit signs of depression, paranoia, and a belief that they themselves are being victimized, they aren't wrong. But, again, one has to wonder at cause and effect. I don't feel like a victim. Not because the government aren't spying on my website and so on, I'm sure they are, I just don't really care. It isn't going to stop me, so that's that. They aren't going to arrest me for filing freedom of information requests and searching in archives for stuff to publish in support of my suspicions about the world. Or if they did, that would be one hell of a trial. Unlike a lot of muck-raking journalists, I'm not really into playing with fire, so I'm not very likely to get burned. I don't need to have inside sources who could be moles or double agents, fake whistleblowers, honey traps, whatever else. I don't have a problem finding information in support of what I'm trying to do, so I don't have to take the sort of stupid risks that a lot of people take. And thus I have no fear of the repercussions. A case in point. This last week I got an email from Aaron of ageoftransitions.com, and he was pointing me to a film called American Ultra, which is a forthcoming comedy. Naturally, he was pointing it to me because it has all the hallmarks of being a CIA-sponsored production. It stars Jesse Eisenberg from The Social Network, where he played Agent Zuckerberg. There's a shot of Langley in the trailer, which A, is there for no obvious reason, and B, is obscured so only the somewhat sharp-eyed would actually notice it. And so, while I was eating my breakfast that morning, before I had to go to work, I watched the trailer and did a bit of glancing around on IMDb, and I figured out that the writer and the director are basically people that you've never heard of. They've been plucked from obscurity to do this comedy with Jesse Eisenberg and Kristen Stewart. And also that the director's dad works for Voice of America, the well-known CIA State Department propaganda organization. And when you watch the trailer itself, several other things become clear. This is about MKUltra. This is basically a stoner version of the Bourne films, or Salt, both of which had CIA assistants. And it has all the usual elements of the unlikely hero who is thrust into a dangerous, frightening world, and the agency having to track down an agent who has gone rogue. Basically, every recurring trope and theme that we discussed in the CIA and Hollywood Season 1 is in this movie. But of course, looking at all of this won't get me arrested, and so none of it will make it seem like I'm being victimized by the establishment. And the same cannot, of course, be said for people like John Anthony Hill, aka Muad'Dib, this crackpot who got arrested for harassing the bereaved relatives of 7/7 victims, and then trying to influence a trial. Or Tony Farrell, a man who claims he was pushed out by Yorkshire Special Branch and pursued a lengthy but meaningless series of legal proceedings against them. Though according to his LinkedIn page he was actually working for Special Branch the whole time, so make of that what you will. A more recent example of someone who was clearly trying to get themselves arrested is Chris Spivey, who I'm sure most of you will be quite familiar with. And this guy rose to prominence, conveniently enough, just as the likes of Tony Farrell and John Hill and Nick Colostrum were fading away from the British false flag scene. And conveniently enough, a high-profile event happened that allowed him to grandstand and to draw attention to himself. And I'm talking about the Woolwich murder, which Chris Spivey says was entirely faked. He says Lee Rigby never existed, all photos of him are photoshopped, the whole thing was fake blood and crisis actors. Now, I don't normally confront this sort of crap directly, but since I've brought it up, I feel like I have to in this instance. The problem is that Spivey writes these horrendously long, completely unsourced articles, so if you knock down any number of individual arguments that he makes, his supporters just resort to whataboutery, and you find yourself trying to counter-argue against a Nile of shit. So let's just take 3 examples of arguments he has used about Woolwich as illustrations. The first one is that Michael Adebolajo, the Woolwich murderer, is the same person as Jermaine Lindsay, the alleged 7/7 bomber. And you can just compare any 2 photos to see that this isn't true. And this is well and truly from the all black guys look alike school of thinking, and I really don't have anything else to say about it except to express my utter contempt. Number 2. Samantha Lewthwaite, the widow of Jermaine Lindsay and now an international terrorist and perhaps the most wanted woman in the world, assuming she wasn't actually assassinated by a Russian sniper in Ukraine, is the same person as pop starlet Lily Allen. I will admit, the pictures of the two that he chose to make this comparison is a lot closer than the pictures of Lindsay and Adebolajo, but then less people think that all white women look alike than all black men look alike, so you have to be a bit more convincing, I guess. I mean, the two images are still clearly two different people, and if you compare any other picture of Lily Allen to any other picture of Samantha Lewthwaite, you get the idea. The third argument, which I've also heard made by the similar attention-seeking prick Ula Damagord, is that the old lady in the Michael Adebolajo video is an actor. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, after the murder of Lee Rigby, the two Michaels hung around waiting for the police to show up, and in the meantime someone, possibly someone who was told to do this, got off a bus and filmed Adebolajo with blood all over his hands, giving this wild-eyed rant about this, that and the other, and in the background you see a little old woman walking up the pavement. It is Spivey's and others' contention that this little old lady is an actor, because she doesn't seem to notice what's going on, that there's this guy dressed all in black with blood on his hands, ranting and raving and waving a knife about. But there are basically two counter-arguments to this. First, if she was an actor, would she not have been told to react to Adebolajo doing his thing? The fact that you think someone is behaving unrealistically is actually more reason to think that they are authentic than that they are an actor playing a role. After all, why would they pick a terrible crisis actor to be in the background of this shot of the only video of the highest profile terror event in this country in several years? It makes much more sense that she's actually just a little old lady. And second, little old ladies, and gentlemen, tend to be a bit slower on the uptake, and their senses aren't quite as acute and sharp as younger people. Not always, but still. Anyone who has worked in a shop with a lot of elderly customers, or any other job with a lot of older people, you will know that you can be stood right behind them, trying to do something, and they can be completely, blissfully unaware that you're even there. It's not uncommon at all. But Spivey, Damagord, and their army of cretinous followers don't give a toss about this. And this leads me into something I've been meaning to say for a while about the everything is fake crowd, and that is that a lot of them just seem to be lacking in basic human consideration. I've seen people saying the most vicious things about victims of the Boston bombing just because they want to think that the person is an actor, and therefore is a valid target, if you like. And bear in mind that Boston was only a few weeks before Woolwich, and that both of these gave a massive boost to this growing fakery subculture. And likewise with this old lady in Woolwich, rather than think, would an old person necessarily see what I see and hear what I hear on that video? After all, the video itself is focused on Adebolajo, so I am focused on Adebolajo, whereas she is walking down a street with her shopping with other things to worry about. Rather than think like that, with some basic sympathy and consideration of what it must be like for other people, instead of anything even resembling that thought process, these fools just claimed she was an actor. Now, since coming to prominence, Spivey has been arrested several times, fueling this "they're coming for the conspiracy theorists" paranoia of his followers. And he has recently been convicted of harassment for, among other things, attempting to contact Lee Rigby's widow. Now, while the guy may look like a copper and talk like a copper, albeit not a very bright one, I don't think that Spivey is a disinfo agent. I just think he's an idiot who lacks some basic human consideration. He's a moral and social imbecile, if you like. The same with a lot of these people. They aren't working for the government, even though they are ultimately doing the government's work for them. So while I do have some sympathy with Spivey, in that I think he's probably been encouraged and provoked into doing some of this by people around him who have other agendas, just like with John Anthony Hill, I still think he had it coming to him. This sort of thing doesn't happen to me, and it isn't because I'm not a threat, it's because I'm not a twat. I have no interest in getting personal contact with the victims of terrorist attacks to try and validate some fantasy I have about myself being the shining knight of truth. For one thing, I'm too busy trying to make sense of the results of this later FOIA success. I just don't have the time to be a self-deluding tosspot, or at least not to anything like the extent that Spivey evidently does. And his conviction has been followed by the arrest of one of the people who was at the centre of the Hampstead hoax, this fake story that there was a satanic paedophile abuse ring in Hampstead in London. And once again I will point people to the work of Keelan Balderson of wideshut.co.uk and of Thomas Sheridan, both of whom called this hoax very early on and maintained sanity in the face of a lot of craziness around all that. So this woman Sabine, who was centrally involved in the original video of these children claiming to have been abused, and who thus leaked their information, their identities into the public domain, and has since been making all kinds of accusations against all kinds of people, she's been arrested. And once again, I'm left thinking it's about fucking time. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who are going around making baseless accusations and getting into legal trouble for it, because I've been on the receiving end of quite a lot of malicious rumour and false accusations. Now, I'm not saying that the people who did it to me deserve to go to jail, but I could probably sue them quite successfully for defamation if I was of that kind of mindset. But I'm not. Like I say, I'm too busy doing things that actually matter to me. Now, this Hampstead thing is kinda hilarious because it's all falling apart. There are schisms and factions appearing all over this small band of fanatical idiots who supported this story. You still have Belinda Mackenzie, the world's dodgiest woman, who deserves to be arrested even more than Sabine. She's still knocking around. And it appears that Brian Gerrish, a far right-wing ex-military man who turned alternative media host, seems he's still involved, even after long-time friends told him of the damage he'd done by promoting this non-story. But there does appear to have been some kind of falling out, because now some supporters of this story are decrying Belinda and Brian as the managers of some kind of psyop.
And of course, there was a lot of the videos, a lot of the visuals Belinda made with her TAVR Speak, where she's, it seems like she's supporting the case, but she's underhandedly put some poison in there, like hamster, hands of Hampstead, or
yes.
leave Hampstead alone.
Yeah, we believe that Belinda Ella's hiding like a fox in a den. We believe that Belinda Mackenzie is a high-ranking Masonic witch. And
this is the information we've been advised on.
And her TAVR Speak Hands of Hampstead was when her Hampstead friends were telling her to help them. They were asking for help to ease off the pressure, to ease the pressure from Hampstead. What she should have been saying is, hands of the innocent children, you sodomizing child murderers. This is what she should really have been saying, not hands of Hampstead, which is a den of child murdering sodomite Talmudic beasts. Yes. And we'd like to move on now, because
there's another little point I wanted to make. Sorry to interrupt.
Go on.
That not just that we are disassociating from our Mackenzie friends, but also I would like to say that we stopped any communication with Hampstead Research as well after they published another important piece of court material, which is Jean Clement recordings.
They got from Sabine McNeil.
Exactly. After we expressly
they asked them not. They asked us, may they publish it, and we told them that we were going to publish the Jean Clement recordings on our website as and when we were ready, and in the format that we wished to present it. In the same way, we told Sabine McNeil that we were going to publish the children's videos,
and please don't publish anything.
And this seems to be another template of theirs, that they love to leak. They like to leak sensitive documents. Yeah.
But not only this incident, there were quite a few things. For example,
look, it's a psyop. The Hampstead Research blog and website is a psychological operation. It's a PR operation. Charlotte Ward, whatever her name is, she's a
Jackie Farmer.
She's Belinda's little protege. She stayed a year or so in Belinda's house, and
he's been in close contact with Belinda and saving the whole time.
Yes, and we're exposing them all now. They're counterintelligence operatives. They work all of these cases, along with the likes of Brian Gerrish
and
Bill Maloney,
who actually
Collins,
who informed the police a few days after the first interview of the children. And we believe that perhaps Brian Gerrish is also responsible for assisting to kidnap the children.
Now, obviously, I don't think you should spend your time listening to the whole conversation that I took that clip from, but if you must, I found this on the Hoaxstead Research blog under the title Abe and Ella Disown Sabine, Belinda and Charlotte! ! Of course, I do think all of this is a bit of a soap opera, and in truth, it should be beneath me to even play that clip, but I gave in to temptation, in part because it amuses me. Because, once again, I'm not convinced that Gerrish or Belinda are PSYOPs agents. I think they are both dodgy as fuck and are merchants of bullshit. But there are a lot more random con artists out there than there are Special Branch. Statistically speaking, even with people like Gerrish and Belinda who have long records of extremely dubious associations, even them are more likely to be idiots than agents. But the sort of people who would believe in the Hampstead hoax are the same sorts of people who wouldn't be able to recognise someone as a liar without attributing those lies to a larger conspiracy. For such people, that has to be what they believe. So what's the answer to this mess? Because it is a mess, and I'm as sick of it as you are, if not more so, which is why I've been speaking out about it more and more this last year or so. For me, the answer is integrity. Personal and intellectual integrity. Which means, sometimes, drawing lines and saying that you don't want to associate with certain people or groups, even if it brings you more fame and money. For one thing, there isn't enough money in the alt media to make it worth selling out. And for another, I feel I have achieved a decent amount so far, despite my rather antisocial attitude towards most of the rest of the movement. My article on the DoD Entertainment Liaison Office documents has been picked up by fresh media outlets recently, though now they're giving me all of the credit and forgetting Matt Alford's name, but I guess the important thing is that the story, the research itself, is having an impact. A lot of people are now reading about this, the reactions have been generally very good, so, inasmuch as that makes a difference to anything, it is doing so. However, before I leave you, dear listeners, I do want to give you an example of another solution. An example of crackpottery in action, and of me cracking down on it. On July 22nd, the same date as the Anders Breivik massacre, and of the assassination of Jean-Charles de Menezes, and of the bombing of the King David Hotel, none of which is relevant, on July 22nd, I received an email from one of these media fakery types. I will read to you the exchange in a minute, but it began just like almost every other conversation I've had with one of these people, with them asking me how much research I had done, or telling me that I hadn't done enough, as though the quantity of research, rather than the quality, is what matters, as though I must have just not seen enough evidence to convince me that the whole thing is fake, as though it isn't possible for two people to look at the same evidence and see different things, as though they had no ability or inclination to consider that someone else's view might be different. I'm not kidding, this is very common, not ubiquitous, but still extremely common in the fakery crowd. Aside from the two guys that Pierce has done a couple of shows with, I really can't think of anyone in that part of the alt media who acts like human beings. And so, to this email exchange. Georges Bouchard, the name, probably fake, of my interlocutor, contacted me and wrote, "I think you ought to study up some more on the Boston bombings, and there's a lot more. Check out the videos of Mum of Gravy Pie on YouTube. Also, Carlos Arredondo Fraud on YouTube. And then there's a link, goodnewsaboutgod.com/studies/political/New World Order/BostonMarathon.htm. So I wrote back, I think you should fuck off. I mean, Mum of Gravy Pie? No one who is serious has a name like that. So in future, keep your condescending remarks and your shitty it's all fake YouTube videos to yourself. Georges then wrote an email that he copied me into but appears to have been to lots of other people, that just said, this guy appears to be seriously bipolar. Who would have guessed? So I responded, I'd rather appear to be bipolar than have no common sympathy for people who've had their limbs blown off. His response, problem is, it didn't happen. Read the link. And then it's the goodnewsaboutgod.com link again. But don't worry about me. I've deleted your podcast from my Android app, and as soon as I locate your 7.7 book that I downloaded for free, I'll remove it from my hard drive. Your initial response show me that you are not in a mentally sound state, and therefore your work cannot be trusted. I am not sure if you hate the MSM, or the MSM hates you. Whatever the case, I suggest you check yourself into the British healthcare system for a socialised medical evaluation. I'll stick with the No Agenda Show, The Sunday Wire, and James Fetzer's The Real Deal, along with dash of RT. I suppose you think the ISIS beheading videos are real too. You might be government shill or perhaps an undercover agent has injected you with government propaganda serum. I don't know if you can get Joyce Riley's show in your country, but it might help you to wise you up. Your response to me was or is the most ridiculous I have ever received during the 10 years or more I have corresponded with internet celebrities such as yourself. Lucky I've had some real-life experience with what the US Peace Corps refers to as the walking wounded, so your response was an immediate giveaway to your subliminal state of artificial reality. And if all that wasn't weird enough, he goes on to say, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that you have been suicided at some point in the near future, but in your case there is a high probability that it will have been an actual suicide. Will it be a single bullet to the head, through the mouth, the ear? I'm told that carbon monoxide is perhaps the easiest. Just lock yourself in a sealed garage with your car motor running. Just to make it look good, leave an ISIS flag nearby. Also, don't forget to leave a note asking someone to take care of your dog. That's what they do around here. Cheers, Johnny Jihad, another British subject. I have to give him credit for the sign-off, that did make me laugh, but the rest of it just appears to be the completely misdirected rantings of a madman. As you can imagine, the exchange continued with me telling him to fuck off once more and him trying to bait me into responding again. I've seen enough of this over the years to know when someone is a time waster who is just trying to waste your time. So this, right here, is a practical example of crackpottery and how best to respond to it. Do not get drawn in. The crackpot will always try and find another angle. They will move the goalposts of the discussion to something else each time that you successfully refute what they're saying. They don't want to win an argument, they just want to not lose one. You see, I'm different. I love winning arguments. But as I've got into my 30s, I've realised that some arguments just aren't worth winning, no matter how easy it might be. It's better to just draw a line, tell someone to go fuck themselves, and move on to happier things. And as to the government trying to put Islamists in the same fishing net as conspiracy theorists, the same thing applies. Make it clear that you distinguish yourself from such people, and that what you are doing is ethical. One of the bad things about these anti-terror laws is that they're so vague that almost anyone could be arrested for these sorts of charges. But the good thing is that they are so vague that they've got to convince a jury that you've actually done something wrong and with bad intentions. With someone like Spivey, that's not hard. But if you're a decent person, it is actually quite hard. So that's what I've been thinking about recently. I know I keep promising a more serious episode, but I have got Adam lined up soon to talk about the movie Kingsman, which is a hugely interesting piece of occultish spy fiction, so if you haven't seen that, then please illegally download a copy, because that should be the next episode. I am still working on the Marilyn Monroe idea. I've been watching a lot of documentaries so I can try and get a handle on how all of this has been covered in things that people might have already seen and see if I can, offer something a bit different. But more episodes are coming, so thank you for sticking with ClandesTime since I've quit YouTube and adopted this completely unpredictable schedule for releasing episodes. Thanks to those of you who've signed up for BFB subscriptions, and thanks to those of you who've bought copies of my book recently, and those who bought the digital download of the CIA and Hollywood Season 1. I am grateful to all of you. Sincerely, it means a lot to me that there are people in the world who are actually willing to part with some hard-earned money for this kind of stuff. And with that, I guess we'll wrap this up for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've at least got some food for thought out of it, if nothing else. And that you stay with the show and tell your friends in case they're interested in this sort of thing too. You can subscribe to ClandesTime via RSS feed, either video or audio, and via email, and all the options are at spyculture.com/follow. As always, I am Tom Secker, so thank you for listening, and take care.
But if I go mad, no one will know it. I won't let it be seen. 'Cause I don't want you to be sad for me. Be happy. Don't thought I could hear rain. Sunburst light bulb fades. go mad.